there's so much literature out there and so many studies and so much evidence, and you hear it from everyone in your surroundings, from your doctors, from anyone saying, like, oh, just really avoid stress because stress is the worst thing if you're trying to conceive, and really reduce the hormone cortisol, and you should just be full of endorphins and happy hormones, and really just be careful, reduce your stress levels. So then, of course, you're feeling like, oh my God, you're feeling like stressed about feeling stressed. And then it's this vicious cycle that, does not make anything better. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the very beginning. Happy Thursday. I hope you're doing well. I hope this week has been fine, not too stressful. It's almost Friday. I remember when I was working at my last corporate job, somebody would always say on Thursdays, like, happy Friday Eve. So almost the weekend time. So I'm hoping that you don't feel too stressed and that this week has been not too bad. And that actually brings me also to today's topic, which is all about stress. I think it's such an important topic, especially when we think about the trying to conceive phase or the TTC phase. If it's, no matter if it's natural TTC or if you're going for fertility treatments, stress is just so omnipresent. And even for people who are not conceiving, right? I think we all can really benefit for taking a minute to talk about stress and how common it is, and kind of share our tips and tricks for how to manage different stress levels. So that's what I want to do today, to really dedicate some time to talk about some things that helped me in the past that I'm still doing, and hopefully, you can also leave some comments to really share what helps you to kind of start that conversation about, yet again, debunking that taboo topic of stress and always having to function like a robot. But yeah, I mean, if you've been through a longer TTC phase, or if you've been through fertility treatments, I'm sure, probably like me, you've heard things like, oh, just don't stress yourself, go on a vacation, take it easy, just have some fun, and many more helpful tips like these. And I don't think people even mean bad. I mean, like with everything, right? When they say those things, because I'm sure people just want to give you helpful advice, and it's all very, nice, and maybe it comes from a good place. But I think really the problem with things like saying to people like, oh, don't stress yourself, is that our brain literally doesn't work like that, right? So when you tell someone don't stress, all kind of we're hearing, and I think that's even scientifically proven, is the word stress. It's almost like if someone tells you like, oh, stop overthinking, you will overthink, you'll like almost even more so start overthinking. There's even this concept that I read about as I was preparing this episode called metacognitive anxiety, which is essentially the feeling of being anxious or being stressed about the fact that you are anxious. And I think anyone, certainly I have, who's been especially through kind of fertility struggles, knows this feeling all too well, because there's so much literature out there and so many studies and so much evidence, and you hear it from everyone in your surroundings, from your doctors, from anyone saying, like, oh, just really avoid stress because stress is the worst thing if you're trying to conceive, and really reduce the hormone cortisol, and you should just be full of endorphins and happy hormones, and really just be careful, reduce your stress levels. So then, of course, you're feeling like, oh my God, you're feeling like stressed about feeling stressed. And then it's this vicious cycle that, does not make anything better. So I really want to talk about, kind of what I learned about in these interactions between, kind of fertility and stress, and to also give you a few tips that I found to be more realistic, because I think that's really what the kind of breaking point of the crux is, that some of the advice that you hear out there, that you read out there, is just simply not realistic, right? Because it's not as easy as just to like press a button and our stress levels get reduced, right? So for instance, and sometimes it's not even like the whole fertility thing that's causing you stress. So let's say you are trying to conceive, and you don't know if you have a problem or not with it, but you're just trying to keep your stress levels low. But let's say you are in a job that is very high stress. So for most people, we can't just go and just like quit our job or change our projects or change our teams or change our boss, right? So it's really, I think, important to also think about, okay, what is realistic? What can be changed? How can we maybe even sometimes change our mindset? And, what can we really do that will positively affect our life without having to almost like throw it all overboard just in an effort to somehow reduce stress levels. So, the number one thing that I would say that has really, really helped me, and I would almost say like throughout my life, that's really something that actually my mom taught me and I've been practicing for so long, is the Serenity Prayer. And I don't know if you've heard about it. I know it's called prayer. I'm really not religious, so hear me out. But it's essentially this kind of saying that goes, I accept the things I cannot change. I have the courage to change the things I can. And I have the wisdom to know the difference. And I think this one is so incredibly powerful. I think, it can be used in a religious context. I think actually the original goes, God give me kind of the courage, the power, and so on. My mom actually back in the days when I was a teenager gave it to me as kind of like a snippet that I put on my desk, because even in early kind of adulthood or like in early teenager times, I was always someone who was overthinking and stressing about grades and kind of had this toxic perfectionism in me. So she was kind of helping me with this to stop overthinking, kind of differentiate between what I can and cannot change. So I always, always, always remind myself of that. And no matter like, again, if you're religious or not, but I think it's nice to reframe it in your mind as, not God give me or universe give me or whatever you believe in, but really I accept the things, and I have the courage and I have the wisdom, because it kind of gives you back that agency, and it kind of puts it back on you to really have the power about those, kind of to be able to put things in perspective and to be able to reframe how we think about things. So, to give you an example to make this really applicable, let's say if, for instance, at work, right, you're really, really stressed about a project and you're thinking about like, okay, what can I do to maybe bring these stress levels down a bit? So if we think about kind of that first part of the saying, right, the I accept the things I cannot change. I mean, here, let's say we cannot change that. Maybe we have to deliver the project in a presentation. Maybe it's a PowerPoint format. Maybe it's kind of a bigger group you have to speak to. So we cannot change that, right? It's a given, it's a fact. And then we can think about, well, where can we have the courage to change the things that we can? And this one kind of almost always requires some courage. So let's say you are feeling really stressed about this because there's a deadline approaching, right? And it just feels a bit too much. So the thing that you can change is potentially talk, let's say, to your manager and see maybe, you can ask for an extension. Of course, that requires courage, right? But this is something you can actively try to change. Maybe it's also not even kind of the time restraint that causes you stress, but maybe it's the factor that, you would have to present it in front of a big group, or, maybe you're anxious about public speaking. So again, let's say maybe if it's done in a virtual environment, maybe you can talk to your manager that you can do it like with camera off over your computer. Or even if it is in a live environment, maybe you can talk about doing it seated, then standing up, because, that can also influence how comfortable we feel when we do public speaking. So all of these, I think, are like good examples of really thinking about, okay, what are the things we have to accept? And then where can we actually bring up that courage to go and actually change something? And then if, let's say, putting it in a fertility context, right, like in my case, how it all started, I could not change that my AMH levels were dropping like crazy. That was a fact, right? That they were kind of declining by 80% year over year. Like it was just happening, no idea why. So I had to accept that fact, even though that was really even hard to accept. And it is also hard. Like I think that's also important to know that, it is hard work to sometimes just accept that this is something we cannot change. But then, thinking about, okay, where could I bring up the courage to make a change, to make a difference? Was in my case, in the fertility context, right, to kind of seek out help, to do some research, to understand, okay, what kind of tests do I need? What kind of fertility specialists are out there that maybe specialize in that? And then really come up with a kind of an individualized plan for my unique situation. So that was kind of, the way that then I was able to just accept that this was happening, but at the same time didn't feel like a, kind of victim of circumstances, but still had, some options to just do something that would, make a change or would make a difference in my case. And I think it's also really, really important to just internalize that third sentence of the saying, and I have the wisdom to know the difference, because I've often found that this is almost the hardest one. Because so often when we are faced with like a big problem or an issue, something that causes us stress, it's even really hard to really know, okay, what can be changed and what can't. And I think we as humans sometimes even really, really struggle to just accept that some things we cannot change, right? Like some things are out of control. And I think the fertility thing about, when you will get pregnant, how you will get pregnant, that's such a big one that we simply cannot control. Even with all, kind of interventions, IVF, whatever it is, the actual, kind of fact about if, that embryo or like, if it implants or not, this is something we really, really cannot control. So I think really internalizing that third part of knowing the difference, knowing what you need to accept and where you can get active, can just be really powerful. And I found really life changing when you think about reducing stress levels. So that is, I think, probably the biggest tip that I can give you to, kind of remind yourself of that saying. Again, it's called Serenity Prayer if you want to look it up. And yeah, honestly, I had it like on my desk for years, just, kind of always in my eyesight to remind myself. And still to this day, no matter, again, if it's a fertility context or any other problem I'm faced with that causes me stress, I just really, really remind myself of that and kind of say it to myself. So the second thing that I learned to do is to put things in perspective. And this one, I think, is, an interesting one because it's definitely easier said than done. But I think it's really important when you think about this, what I talked about in the beginning, this whole experience about feeling anxious about being anxious, right? That like vicious cycle that can get stronger and stronger and stronger. So, I found it really extremely stressful to even like think about this absolute uncertainty whether, I'll ever be able to get pregnant or stay pregnant. And my partner is actually extremely good at calming me down. And I think he really taught me this concept of putting things in perspective. So with this, what I kind of try to do is just to really, first of all, I think what we did is understanding, okay, we have so much to be grateful for. When you kind of try to zoom out and look at that big picture, right? And kind of for us, it was really understanding, well, no matter what happens, we have each other, we're healthy, just to almost like internalize that gratefulness. And I think for secondly, what we did, what helped put things in perspective, was just also really acknowledging that, for us, it's an absolute non-negotiable that we want to be parents, that we want to have a family, and that we made a plan, that kind of one way or the other, no matter if it meant fertility treatments or adoption, that we would make it happen. And I think that just really helped me put things in perspective because it removed such a huge load of pressure. Because as I'm sure anyone who's been through this can really understand that so often, like when you are in this TTC bubble, your whole world revolves around it. And it's like all you can think about. But when you kind of almost are able to lay down that foundation and have, that kind of security or kind of remind yourself that no matter what, it's going to be okay, it just really, really helped me to zoom out and again, put things in perspective and look at that bigger picture. And of course, that also really helped, to understand that our lives or my life does not revolve around the fact of like whether I'll be able to get pregnant or stay pregnant, that, my relationship will not make or break, be made or broken by the fact if, I am able to or not able to. So I think that context was just really important. And yeah, as I said, again, it's like really that zooming out and seeing almost that like long-term vision, that the hardship that you're in maybe today will not define, your life forever. So I think that also really helped to kind of reduce some short-term stress levels at least. And also even like in a work context, because again, I just want to be conscious to also give different examples, because I feel like it's not sometimes not just kind of the fertility issues that are causing us stress, but sometimes and often it's also the work part that adds to that stress, or maybe is the main stressor. So I kind of always want to give examples for both. So for me, in the work context, an example that was really helpful for me to internalize was in one of my prior jobs when I was working in brand management. My former boss used to always say, like, honestly, don't stress yourself. We're not performing brain surgery on babies here. And I think it's really important, again, and that just helped me like to really put things in perspective, because sometimes when you're working with deadlines and work things can just seem so monumental, and you're just like, they're so like everything seems so big, every deadline, every deliverable, and you just like kind of go go go, and you feel stressed, and you think about not letting down your team or whatever it is. But again, like if you miss a deadline or if you need an extension, no one will die, right? In most cases. I mean, listen, if you are a brain surgeon working on babies, then this advice is completely not for you. And please leave a comment how you manage stress levels. But for the majority of us who, let's say, have not a job that requires this kind of life saving aspect to it, I think it's really important to internalize, right? Like kind of at the normal desk job, that no one will die if you ask for an extension, or if you have to maybe give up a project or switch teams. So just really again important to put things in perspective, and at the same time also that most likely like you will not get fired or demoted or whatever if maybe one thing does not go well or does not go to plan. So yeah, for me, it was a really, really crucial technique to internalize it both, I think, in the professional context, but especially also in the fertility context, to just really, kind of have this ability to zoom out and see the bigger picture. And then the third and last thing that I learned to do, or that, kind of it is still to this day really important for me when it comes to managing my stress levels, is to also really define what actually causes me stress and what actually drains my energy and what actually gives me energy. So here, what I mean by that is really understanding my personality type, and I can only recommend that you do, some kind of personality test. And there's so many out there, because it will really help you in every day life context to just understand yourself a bit better, and to also understand what can really help you to deal with stress. So for me, I am an introverted extrovert, and what that means is that I might seem extroverted. I am quite extroverted, but the way that I recharge, or the way that I'm able to refuel and regain energy, is actually by being really introverted, and by actually being like either alone or with the people that are really, really close to me. And that second part is really, really crucial, because let's say while especially when I'm really stressed, I definitely need to cut down on kind of social engagements, like things like, networking, or just like small talk with kind of people that are more like acquaintances, will 100% drain my energy. But spending quality time with kind of people that I love, or really people that are dearest to me, will give me energy. And that I really understood throughout the years. And if it was such an important learning, because for instance, last summer when we were going through kind of the bulk of our IVF stuff with the stimulation and also that first embryo transfer I talked about, we actually had a really, really busy summer. We had visitors every single weekend, coming from abroad, staying with us. I think probably for like 2 months in a row, it was back to back to back. And if we didn't have visitors a weekend, we were traveling. So for some people, or like kind of family members that I told that to, and maybe those that even knew that we were going for IVF, they were like, why would you do this? Isn't that really stressful? But for me, it was kind of not only a coping mechanism to also get my mind off things, but I knew that those people that I was choosing to spend time with, those were kind of my energy givers. Those were those people that could recharge my batteries and really help me to stay, keep those stress levels that the fertility treatments were causing at that point, and keep those stress levels as low as possible. So that was really, really important for me to understand, and I think it's sometimes even hard because you really have to make then clear decisions about, what people might be draining your energy, what people might be giving you energy, and also be quite strict about kind of, who you surround yourself with at certain parts in your life when maybe things might get a bit stressful. But at the same time, it can be so, so powerful because you can literally have, or you literally have the power to recharge your batteries without, changing that much in your surrounding. But again, it's really important to understand then your personality type, because this might not be true for you if, let's say, if you are an extroverted extrovert. I mean, there's, I think, 4 different types how you can like be an extrovert and introvert, and then whether you're like introverted or extroverted in the way of like how you recharge your energy. So for some, it's really tough and it's really hard to just be alone and kind of take that time, and they need to be constantly surrounded, by other people, and not even like having, let's say, deep conversations, but just being like out and about and surrounded with people, and kind of the life of the party. And that is maybe what gives you energy, and maybe that's exactly what you need after a long and stressful day at work. For me, it will always be the chilling, on the couch by myself with kind of either again by myself or with the people that I love. But yeah, it is, I think, super duper important to really internalize that, take the time to, do some kind of like investigation, some personality test, to just really understand, what it is that you need in a certain situation. But yes, these were my 3 main tips that helped me to reduce my stress levels in a realistic way. And I think that's just really so important because, again, I didn't want to make this episode about like monumental things. And not to say that I didn't make some monumental changes in my life. And we are actually coming to an end with this season quite soon. And then season 3 will be really exciting. I'm not going to announce it just yet, but just to say that there are also some really, really monumental changes in my life, especially also the professional context. So not to say that I didn't sometimes have to make the choice to really turn things upside down because I just knew like the, position or the situation that I'm in right now is not, serving me. But more to come on that soon. But I think for now, I just really wanted to leave you with some helpful, applicable, realistic tips that you can easily start applying today, right? Without having to make any drastic changes. So thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, if you have any tips that help you reduce your stress levels, please pop them in the comments because I'd love to read what helps you, and again, start that conversation to really help each other. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.